Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that every house on your street is empty. No footsteps, no voices, no cars on the road, just silence thick enough to make your heartbeat sound loud in your own ears. You step outside, confused, thinking maybe it's a strange holiday or a community gathering you somehow forgot about. But then you notice something far more unsettling. Doors are left open. Breakfast sits untouched on kitchen tables. Toys lie scattered on porches. Cars stand abandoned with keys still in the ignition. It feels as if everyone simply got up and walked away at the exact same moment. No warning, no explanation, no trace of where they went. Across the United States, this chilling scenario actually happened, not once, but in town after town, in deserts, mountains, forests, and farmlands. Entire communities vanished overnight, leaving behind empty streets, frozen memories, and mysteries that still disturb anyone who dares to visit. These are America's ghost towns. The places that died without saying goodbye. Our journey begins in the unforgiving deserts of Nevada, where the sun burns red over abandoned wooden shacks and wind whistles through broken windows like distant voices trapped in time. Here once stood the town of Rhyolite, a place born from sudden hope and destroyed by sudden loss. In the early 1900s, gold fever swept across the West like wildfire. Thousands of treasure seekers, dreamers, gamblers, and wanderers rushed toward a remote patch of dusty land after rumors spread that the hills were bursting with gold. Rhyolite exploded into existence almost overnight. Streets filled with wagons, saloons clattered with the sound of glasses, hotels overflowed. A stunning three-story bank was built with imported glass windows. There were electric lights, running water, and even an opera house. For a moment, Rhyolite was the desert's rising star. But the desert doesn't care about dreams. One day, investors pulled out, the mines dried up, the trains stopped coming, and the spark that held the town alive simply died. People grabbed what they could carry and fled, leaving behind homes, furniture, clothing, and half-finished meals. In less than 5 years, Rhyolite went from booming to abandoned. Walking there today feels like trespassing into someone's life that was paused mid-sentence. The desert wind slams doors that no one touched. Shadows stretch across empty streets at sunset, and some travelers swear they hear faint whispers drifting through the ruins. Whether imagination or something else, Rhyolite stands as a grim reminder of how quickly hope can collapse into silence. From the scorching desert, we move to the quiet, misty forests of Pennsylvania, where an entire town was forced to flee from something people couldn't see but could feel beneath their feet. Centralia was once a peaceful coal mining community where families lived simple, steady lives. Kids played on front lawns. Workers walked to the mines every morning. But in 1962, a fire ignited deep underground in the abandoned coal tunnels. At first, no one worried. Underground fires happened before. But this one refused to die. It spread silently beneath homes, schools, and roads, turning the earth into a ticking time bomb. Strange things started happening. Patches of ground grew hot enough to melt shoes. Smoke seeped from cracks in the pavement. Gas leaked through basements. And then came the most terrifying moment. A young boy fell into a sinkhole when the ground beneath his feet suddenly collapsed into a fiery pit. He survived only because a neighbor heard his screams. That was the turning point. Families packed their belongings and left in a hurry, some without even locking their doors. The government evacuated the entire town. Houses were demolished, streets were closed,
and Centralia became a ghost town swallowed by an underground fire that still burns today and could continue burning for centuries. Driving through Centralia now feels surreal. Empty roads, overgrown sidewalks, and a sense of danger lingering in the air. It's a ghost town born not from human choice, but from a disaster no one could stop. From Pennsylvania's burning ground, we travel north to Alaska's frozen wilderness, where another town vanished overnight, not because of fire, but because of silence. High in the mountains sits what remains of Kennecott, once a proud copper mining town. Workers came from across the country, building homes, schools, hospitals, even a recreation hall. The mines produced millions in copper. But in 1938, without warning, the mines shut down. A train arrived to take the last workers out, and families boarded without knowing they would never return. They left clothing in closets, medical tools on hospital tables, and children's drawings pinned to classroom walls. The town froze in time. Snow piled against windows, wind echoed through empty hallways. Kennecott became a museum of abandonment, untouched for decades, as though waiting for people who would never come back. As we push deeper into America's forgotten stories, the silence becomes louder. Each ghost town we uncover reveals a deeper truth, that sometimes communities collapse in the blink of an eye, and sometimes the reason is far stranger than anyone can explain. In Montana, the mining town of Garnett once echoed with laughter, music, and the clatter of wagons. But brutal winters and dwindling gold forced people out. Some families left in a rush as snowstorms sealed the mountain passes. Today, visitors walk into cabins where dining tables are still set, as if dinner was interrupted a century ago and no one returned to finish the meal. But perhaps the eeriest overnight disappearance happened not in the mountains, but underwater. In Texas, the quiet town of Bluffton was drowned by rising waters when a dam was built. Residents were told to leave immediately. Homes, churches, graveyards, everything vanished beneath the lake. For decades, Bluffton was a ghost town hidden underwater. But during severe droughts, the lake receded, revealing stone foundations, rusty tools, and pieces of history that had been underwater for nearly a century. People walked on land that had once been a living town, now resurfaced like a memory too strong to stay buried. These are the ghost towns of America that didn't fade slowly, they vanished instantly. Towns that remind us how fragile life can be, how uncertain security truly is, and how quickly fate can change the direction of an entire community. And as we continue deeper into these stories, the mysteries only grow darker. Because some towns disappeared due to disaster, but others vanished for reasons still unexplained.
As we continue our journey through America's forgotten corners, we arrive at a place where silence feels heavier than anywhere else. Deep in the Arizona desert lies the remains of a town called Swansea, a place that once buzzed with life, ambition, and promise. In the early 1900s, Swansea grew rapidly after copper was discovered nearby. Investors poured money into the settlement, convinced they were building the next great mining empire. Streets were carved out of the desert floor, smelters roared through the night, and rows of neat wooden homes stretched outward toward the horizon. People came from everywhere: miners, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, families looking for a fresh start. For a short time, Swansea was full of laughter, movement, and the glow of opportunity. But all it took was one miscalculation to bring everything crashing down. The cost of transporting ore became too high.
Copper prices dropped unexpectedly. Machinery broke down faster than it could be repaired. Within months, the economy collapsed. Paychecks stopped coming. Businesses closed their doors. And like a desert storm passing in the night, the people of Swansea vanished almost instantly. They packed whatever they could carry, leaving behind beds, tools, furniture, and personal belongings. Today, the desert sun beats down on their abandoned workshops, and the wind sweeps through empty doorways, carrying the ghosts of dreams that died too soon. From Arizona's burning sands, we traveled to the mist-covered mountains of California, where an entire town was swallowed by the very thing that once made it thrive. The town of Bodie is one of America's most famous ghost towns, but few people know how quickly it died. At its peak in the late 1800s, Bodie was a lawless mining town filled with gunfights, saloons, brothels, and rough characters who lived hard and gambled harder. Stories say that when a young girl was told she was moving to Bodie, she prayed, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." But even in this wild environment, families built homes, children went to school, and stores stocked their shelves with goods from across the world. Then, almost overnight, Bodie fell apart. A series of fires tore through the town, destroying buildings faster than they could be rebuilt. Gold production slowed. People lost confidence. By the time winter arrived, entire families left without warning, abandoning their furniture, clothing, and even toys. Some fled during fierce snowstorms, leaving dinner plates on their kitchen tables and oil lamps still filled with fuel. When you walk through Bodie today, it's as if time has been frozen on purpose. Cabinets remain stocked with dishes. Beds are made. School books rest on desks, open to lessons no one ever finished. It feels like stepping into a moment that never moved forward. Leaving California's ghostly silence behind, we head south to New Mexico, where the dust-covered ruins of Shakespeare tell a chilling story of sudden disappearance. Shakespeare was a boomtown during the Wild West era, a place of outlaws, gunfights, and desperate fortune seekers. The town's inns were packed with travelers, saloons echoed with piano music, and miners spent their hard-earned wages as fast as they made them. But when silver prices dropped sharply, everything unraveled. Businesses shut down. The railroads stopped stopping there. The town's water supply dried up during a brutal drought. And then, almost without warning, everyone left. Entire buildings were locked from the outside, as if people walked out and never looked back. Some rooms were left in perfect condition, beds neatly made, shoes beside doorways, letters sitting unfinished on desks. Shakespeare became a time capsule of the Wild West, a place where history stands still and silence replaces gunfire. From the deserts of New Mexico, we head north to the farmlands of Kansas, where a town named Elmdale faced a tragedy that forced its people to flee without a moment's hesitation. Elmdale sat along the serene Cottonwood River, surrounded by fertile fields that fed generations. Families lived peacefully, and life followed a slow, quiet rhythm. But in the early 1950s, catastrophic flooding changed everything. Torrential rain turned the river into a monster. Water rose faster than anyone expected, blasting through roads, destroying homes, and sweeping away livestock. Entire neighborhoods were submerged in minutes. People grabbed their children, waded through rising water, and ran toward higher ground. Some took nothing with them, not clothes, not photographs, not even valuables. Overnight, Elmdale was emptied. The town never fully recovered. Today, pieces of foundation remain, swallowed by grass and vines, reminders of the night nature showed its unforgiving power. As we push deeper into America's haunting past, we encounter a ghost town that vanished for a reason far more mysterious than disaster or economic collapse. In the forests of Oregon, the small town of Golden once pulsed with religious tension. Unlike most mining towns, Golden was built by families who followed strict beliefs. They banned drinking, gambling, and even music in public. Their neighbors in nearby towns lived very different lifestyles, and conflict grew steadily. One day, without warning, the entire population of Golden abandoned the town. No notes, no explanations, no warnings. They left food in pantries, tools in workshops, and laundry hanging on clotheslines. To this day, no one knows exactly why they left so suddenly. Some believe it was a mass disagreement. Others say it was fear of outsiders. A few claim it was something much darker. Whatever the truth, Golden remains one of the eeriest abandoned towns in America, a place where silence feels like it's hiding something. Our journey across forgotten America continues, revealing town after town that disappeared without finishing their stories. Some were wiped out by nature, others collapsed under economic pressure, and a few simply slipped away like shadows at dusk. But the deeper we explore, the more we realize that not all abandonments were natural, because some towns vanished under circumstances so strange they still raise questions no historian has been able to answer.
Even as you listen right now, thousands of feet below the Nevada desert, inside the silent chambers of once booming tunnels, the air still carries microscopic traces of dynamite dust that miners inhaled more than a century ago. Places like Rhyolite weren't the only ones to vanish. All across the American West, dozens of proud towns rose and fell before many Americans even learned their names. And among them, one remains so unsettling, so sudden, so mysteriously abandoned, that even seasoned historians still hesitate to walk its empty paths after dark. Deep in the valley where the Nevada and California borders seem to blur into a haze of shimmering heat, there lies a place that once promised the American dream wrapped in gold, a town called Goldfield Junction. Today, it is nothing more than a skeletal outline of crumbling walls, half-buried signs, and door frames that shake whenever the desert wind howls. But over a century ago, this spot was once considered the next San Francisco. And then, overnight, it simply disappeared. Goldfield Junction burst into existence during the height of the gold rush's second wave. Trains stopped here every hour. Merchants sold everything from Chinese silk to Minnesota winter coats. Saloon doors never stopped swinging. If you were standing here in 1907, you'd see horses kicking dust clouds into the sky, while miners fresh off a 16-hour shift stumbled toward the bar for cheap whiskey and even cheaper luck. The town population exploded past 10,000. Real estate agents bragged that this was the new capital of the desert. A group of businessmen even planned to build the tallest hotel in Nevada, right here in this tiny patch of sand. But the curse of the West was always the same. When a town depends on one single resource, the moment that resource dries up, everything collapses. For Goldfield Junction, it wasn't just that the gold vein weakened, it was that it vanished, literally overnight. A massive underground collapse deep inside the primary mining tunnel sealed away the only profitable vein. Miners woke up the next morning to find the entrance caved in. Several men were trapped. Many died. The town panicked. Investors pulled out. Within weeks, the railroad company rerouted trains further north. With no gold, no investors, and now no railway, Goldfield Junction's entire economic lifeline was cut in a single month. And then, the strangest part happened. Locals began reporting loud rumblings beneath their feet at night, as if the earth were groaning. Some claimed they heard knocking sounds from under the collapsed mine, as if the lost miners were still trying to escape. Grocery owners boarded up their shops, saying the ground felt unstable. Parents refused to let their children play outside. One family, the McBrides, was so terrified by the tremors that they packed up at 3 a.m. and left all their furniture behind.
The following morning, 6 more families followed. What happened next sealed the town's fate permanently. On a warm June evening, the ground beneath the western side of Goldfield Junction began to tremble. People rushed outside, confused. At first, it felt like the rumble of distant freight trains, except the tracks had already been abandoned. The shaking intensified. Dust clouds erupted. Horses panicked. A huge portion of the old mining shaft collapsed into the earth, creating a crater so large it swallowed 3 buildings whole. Witnesses described seeing roofs dip downward like boats disappearing into a whirlpool. Terrified, every remaining resident left that same night, leaving dinner plates on tables, beds unmade, tools lying where they dropped them. By sunrise, Goldfield Junction was empty, completely, eerily silent. A buzzing boomtown, erased in less than 12 hours. Even today, when explorers walk through the ruins, many claim they still feel faint tremors. Some say the air inside the deserted homes smells faintly of sulfur, as though the ground beneath is still shifting, still restless. And whenever someone approaches the old mining entrance, a low hum echoes from within the darkness, like distant metal dragging across stone. But Goldfield Junction wasn't the only American town to vanish because the ground itself turned against it. Travel east toward the winding, forested Appalachian region, and you'll find another forgotten ghost, the village of Hardison Hollow, Tennessee. While Goldfield Junction collapsed because of geology, Hardison Hollow disappeared because of something far more terrifying. Silence. The kind of silence you can feel pressing against your bones. The kind that makes you question whether the earth remembers the past more strongly than people do. Hardison Hollow was a peaceful settlement tucked into the Appalachian foothills during the late 1800s. A narrow river curled around its wooden cabins, and if you stood on the old bridge in summer, you could hear the sound of water tapping against the stones like a slow heartbeat. Families here were simple, hard-working, deeply connected. They grew corn, tended cattle, and hunted the dense forests that seemed to stretch forever. Then, one autumn morning, a teenage boy went missing. He had gone to fetch water from the river and never returned. Search parties combed the woods for days, but found no footprints, no torn clothing, no disturbance in the soil, just nothing. A week later, a second resident vanished, then a third. No screams, no signs of struggle, just quiet disappearances that left this tight-knit community terrified. Parents kept their children inside. Hunters refused to enter the forest. The riverbank, once a lively gathering place, became something villagers approached with dread. Sheriffs from nearby counties investigated, but uncovering clues in the endless Appalachian woods was like chasing shadows. Then, at sunrise, one morning, the entire town woke up to find something carved into the side of an oak tree near the river, a symbol no one recognized, a crooked spiral with jagged marks radiating outward. The sheriff chalked it up to teenagers, but the townspeople didn't believe that, not for a second. They felt watched, followed, hunted. Over the next 2 weeks, more symbols appeared. On barn doors, on river rocks, on the side of the church. And then the disappearances accelerated. 3 people vanished in one night. Another family fled their home screaming, claiming they heard whispers outside their windows, voices telling them to leave before the river rises. The final straw came when the residents woke one foggy dawn to find the entire forest engulfed in an unnatural quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind, only the river flowing softly, almost too softly, as if it were holding its breath. By midday, every family packed a few belongings, gathered their wagons, and left Hardison Hollow behind. They abandoned homes, livestock, crops, everything. Within 24 hours, the town was deserted. And then the strangest part. 2 days after everyone left, the entire hillside behind Hardison Hollow collapsed in a massive landslide triggered by heavy underground erosion. Had the townspeople stayed, dozens, maybe hundreds, would have died. For years afterward, locals swore that something warned them, something whispered in the dark, something carved those symbols to scare them away before the earth swallowed their homes. Whether those warnings came from nature or something else, no one knows. Today, Hardison Hollow is completely overtaken by forest. Trees grow through living room floors. Vines curl through shattered windows. And if you visit at dusk, when the fog drifts low and the river glows silver, you can almost imagine what it looked like before it vanished. Peaceful, quiet, too quiet. But America holds even stranger stories. Towns not swallowed by the earth, nor evacuated by terror, but erased by humanity's own mistakes. And one of the most haunting examples sits in the blistering heat of southern New Mexico, a community that was wiped clean from the map because of an explosion so powerful it changed the course of world history. A town that disappeared not out of fear, not out of economics, but out of necessity, because something created there was simply too dangerous to coexist with civil life. This was the town of Bingham, a tiny settlement in Socorro County, and the unsuspecting neighbor of the Trinity nuclear testing site. And its story is unlike anything else on American soil. The desert around southern New Mexico holds a silence that feels older than civilization itself. When you walk across its cracked soil, the heat rises in shimmering waves, and the horizon stretches outward like an endless sheet of pale gold. But once, long before the landscape became associated with the birth of the nuclear age, this region was home to a quiet settlement known as Bingham. A cluster of adobe-style homes, a trading post, a dusty road slicing through the open desert, and a community of families who believed they had found peace in isolation. Bingham wasn't rich, it wasn't loud, it didn't have the booming energy of gold rush towns or the eerie mysteries of Appalachian villages. It was simple. Children played with handmade toys in the sand. Ranchers guided horses across the valley at sunrise. At night, the stars looked so close you could mistake them for lanterns hanging just above the earth. For decades, this tiny desert town lived unnoticed by the rest of America. And then, everything changed. In 1945, the U.S. government quietly selected a remote area only a few miles from Bingham as the location for something unprecedented, something secret, something that would alter the future of warfare, diplomacy, and human existence. Locals noticed unfamiliar trucks driving across old cattle trails, new fences, new warnings, soldiers who gave no explanations. The government purchased surrounding lands with little detail, except that it was for military research. But behind closed doors, scientists were building the world's first atomic bomb. As the Trinity test site expanded, the government needed distance, lots of it, between the experiment and civilian life. But Bingham stood directly in the path of what would eventually become the most powerful explosion ever detonated on American soil. Residents were told to stay indoors on certain days. They were warned to avoid the northern plains. Ranchers were ordered not to let their livestock wander too far. The tone of the warnings was calm, too calm, yet the soldiers' expressions told a different story. They looked tense, focused, as if they were guarding something more dangerous than the townspeople could imagine. And then came July 16th, 1945. At 5:29 a.m., the desert sky erupted. The blast from the first atomic bomb illuminated the horizon brighter than the sun itself. For a moment, night became day. Shadows stretched across the desert floor in impossible shapes. A blinding sphere of fire rose upward, swirling in reds, oranges, and burning white light. The shock wave raced outward, shattering windows in isolated ranch houses, knocking over tools, rattling the bones of anyone awake to witness it. People in Bingham described feeling their hearts tremble, not from fear, but from the sheer pressure vibrating through their bodies. Even those who didn't see the explosion saw the sky afterwards. A massive pillar of smoke and electric energy rose upward like a ghost made of light and ash. No one in Bingham had ever witnessed anything like it. And while the townspeople were told for years that the explosion posed minimal risk, the truth would reveal itself slowly, painfully. Livestock began falling ill. Dust coated the land in a strange, fine powder. Sometimes it glowed softly in the morning sun, carried by the gentle desert winds drifting from the direction of the test site. Children developed mysterious rashes. Elderly residents felt their hair thinning. The once quiet desert now carried traces of radiation, invisible, silent, deadly. The government offered reassurances, but no answers. They encouraged residents to relocate temporarily, but many suspected it wouldn't be temporary at all. Ranchers noticed their cattle giving birth to deformed calves. Mothers noticed their children coughing through the night, no matter the season. Bingham's people were resilient, but how do you fight something you cannot see, something that lingers in the soil, in the water, in the very air you breathe? Slowly, families began leaving. One wagon, then two, then an entire row of 6 trucks heading toward the highways with mattresses tied on top and furniture shaking in the back. The desert wind swept over empty houses, rolling dust through broken windows. Grocery shops closed. The trading post's door swung open and closed in the breeze because no one was there to latch it anymore. By the early 1950s, Bingham was nearly silent. And then came the final blow. The U.S. Atomic Energy Commission officially claimed the surrounding land, including the remains of Bingham, to secure a permanent perimeter around the Trinity site. Residents who stayed were forced to leave. Homes were boarded up or debulldozed. The schoolhouse, small but cherished, was dismantled piece by piece. The church that once held Sunday gatherings for ranch families fell into ruin under government orders, its bells taken down to prevent trespassers from being drawn to the area. By the end of the decade, Bingham was gone, not abandoned by choice, not buried by nature, not emptied by superstition, but erased by necessity. A real American town swallowed up by the birth of nuclear science. Today, only stone foundations and scattered fragments remain, half buried beneath desert dust. Visitors are restricted. Many parts are still unsafe due to lingering radiation from tests conducted generations ago. Yet when you stand near the outer perimeter fence, the wind still carries faint echoes, the soft creaking of an old gate, the ghost-like rattle of something metal shifting in the sand, the quiet feeling that this land remembers everything. The explosion, the evacuation, the families who left but never came back, and the dawn that turned the entire sky into fire. And what happened in Bingham wasn't an isolated tragedy. Throughout the American West, more towns would fall victim to mankind's hunger for progress, technology, and power. But some ghost towns weren't destroyed by explosions, earthquakes, or missing residents. Some were erased simply because the world moved on without them. And one of the most heartbreaking examples stands in the frozen landscapes of Montana, a mining town that once symbolized hope, wealth, and industrial growth, and then collapsed under the weight of its own poisoned legacy. This was the town of Bannock, where greed, corruption, and human ambition collided so violently that the community walked away from everything overnight.
In the wide-open wilderness of Montana, the winter winds sweep across the mountains with a force that feels almost alive. They whistle through abandoned doorways, rattle loose shingles, and carry the soft, ghost-like echo of voices that once filled the small but thriving mining town of Bannock. Before it became a frozen monument to America's past, Bannock shimmered with the same golden promise that drew thousands westward. Here, in the 1860s, hope came wrapped in the glitter of gold flakes washed from icy creeks. Families arrived with wagons packed full of dreams. Miners hammered wooden stakes into the earth, claiming patches of land they believed would change their lives forever. By lantern light, they worked through bitter nights, chasing fortunes buried beneath the frozen soil. For a brief moment, Bannock was alive. A schoolhouse, saloons, rough timber huts lining the streets, children running across the frost-covered ground in worn boots, while their parents exchanged stories about new gold veins deeper in the hills. The smell of campfire smoke drifted through the valley, mixing with the sharp scent of pine carried down from the mountains. Bannock wasn't just a mining outpost. It was a community built on hope, grit, and raw human determination. But behind that hope, something darker brewed. Among the miners and families living here, a shadowy force began to grow. Robberies, assaults, and eventually murders. Travelers heading in and out of Bannock would vanish, only for their wagons to be found weeks later, stripped clean. Rumors spread of a violent gang patrolling the roads disguised as lawmen. While the community tried to hold on to its faith in justice, fear was taking root. Little did they know, the very man sworn to protect them was the one tearing the town apart. Henry Plummer, the elected sheriff of Bannock, carried himself like a gentleman. Calm voice, careful steps, a polite nod to anyone who crossed his path. Residents trusted him, many admired him. But behind that quiet demeanor, Plummer was leading a secret band of outlaws who called themselves the Innocents. Under the cover of night, they terrorized the region, stealing gold shipments and murdering those who resisted. The sheriff of Bannock was the most dangerous criminal in Montana territory, and the town had no idea. For over a year, the Innocents ruled the roads. Travelers avoided passing through Bannock after dusk. Merchants refused to move valuable goods without armed escorts. Miners, exhausted from their long days, slept with rifles beside their bunks. Fear crept through the town like a winter frost, slowly, silently, until everyone began looking over their shoulder. Everything changed the moment a few brave citizens decided they had had enough. A secret group formed, the Montana Vigilantes, men who worked by day and hunted criminals by night, watching, listening, tracking every suspicious movement. As the Vigilantes followed the trail of violence across the region, they uncovered a horrifying pattern that led back to one man, Sheriff Henry Plummer. The confrontation was swift, brutal, unavoidable. One freezing night, the Vigilantes surrounded the sheriff, presented their evidence, and dragged him to the gallows he himself had ordered built. Without a trial, without hesitation, the sheriff was executed as the snow fell silently around the watching crowd. Justice had been served, but Bannock would never recover. Even after the innocents were eliminated, something within the town had broken. Trust, stability, the fragile unity that held Bannock together had shattered. Miners left in waves, unable to shake the feeling that the town itself had been tainted. The gold supply dwindled, businesses closed, the woodshed behind the school fell silent. Parents stopped bringing their children to lessons because they were preparing to leave. And then winter delivered its final cruelty. Temperatures dropped so low that the creek froze solid. Buildings cracked under the pressure of ice forming in the walls. Horses collapsed in the snow. Supplies ran dangerously low. A deadly combination of fear, dwindling resources, and brutal weather became too much for Bannock's remaining families. In the darkness of a frigid January night, wagons rolled out of the town one by one, their wheels crunching over frozen earth as families abandoned everything they had built. By sunrise, Bannock was empty. Not officially, not permanently, but spiritually, nothing remained. And Bannock wasn't the only town whose hopes were crushed by corruption, greed, and environmental catastrophe. Across America, dozens of settlements became ghost towns because of disasters far more destructive. Disasters created not by criminals, but by the very ground people lived on. And perhaps the most haunting example lies in the northern Midwest, where a thriving community was erased not by gold, not by crime, not by radiation, but by water. A town swallowed whole when a man-made lake flooded an entire valley, leaving rooftops and chimneys peeking above the surface like tombstones beneath a vast, silent ocean. This was the town of Dunsburg, Minnesota, a community that disappeared beneath rising water in a single night.
The waters of Dunsburg rose faster than anyone could have imagined. Families woke to find streets disappearing beneath murky, churning currents. Roofs of homes tilted against the flow, chimneys cracked, and barns floated like driftwood through the quiet valley. People scrambled to save what they could, but there was little to do. The lake swallowed entire blocks in a single night. By dawn, Dunsburg no longer existed. Only the occasional tip of a steeple or a weathered fence post hints at the life that had once thrived here. And yet, even underwater, the town has a story to tell. Remnants of a past life preserved beneath the cold, still surface, whispering secrets to those who remember, or those who return during the rare droughts when the waters recede. And as we reflect on the countless towns we've journeyed through, from the sun-baked streets of Rhyolite to the frozen corridors of Bannock, from the haunted silence of Hardison Hollow to the fiery dawn over Bingham, a pattern emerges. Across deserts, mountains, rivers, and plains, the story of America's ghost towns is more than just about vanished populations. It is a story of hope and ambition, of human resilience and sudden despair, of nature's power and mankind's unintended consequences. Each empty street, each abandoned home, each silent mine speaks not only of the past, but of fragile dreams and the delicate thread that holds a community together. And in many ways, these ghost towns are mirrors. They reflect the fragility of human endeavors when faced with the unpredictable forces of the earth, society, and sometimes fate itself. They remind us that even the most vibrant towns, filled with life and laughter, can vanish overnight, leaving behind only memories, echoes, and the lessons etched into the ruins. We are drawn to these places, not just by curiosity, but by the desire to understand what was lost, to imagine the stories frozen in time, and to feel the invisible threads connecting us to those who once lived, loved, and labored there. And as the sun sets over the scattered remnants of these towns, casting long shadows across broken windows, cracked roads, and rusting tools,
It's impossible not to feel the weight of history pressing gently on our shoulders. Silence fills the air, but it is not empty. It is alive with stories, stories of triumph, tragedy, greed, courage, fear, and the inexorable passage of time. And somewhere in that silence, if we listen closely, we can hear the heartbeat of a nation pulsing faintly through the ruins, reminding us that even in abandonment, life leaves a trace. From the deserts of the Southwest to the forests of Appalachia, from the mountains of Montana to the submerged valleys of the Midwest, America is dotted with these forgotten towns, silent witnesses to the dreams and failures of those who came before us. And while many may never return to these empty streets, the stories they carry remain alive. They challenge us to remember, to reflect, and to respect the delicate balance between ambition and reality, progress and preservation, life and the ever-present shadow of disappearance. And so, as we leave these ghost towns behind, we carry with us more than images of crumbling facades and wind-whipped streets. We carry the lessons of impermanence, the echoes of human courage, and the haunting reminder that even in the vast, sprawling landscapes of the United States, life is fleeting, and nothing, not even a thriving community, is guaranteed to last forever. And perhaps the most enduring truth of all is this: the past never truly leaves us. It lingers in the dust, in the empty windows, in the wind that whispers through abandoned streets. It waits quietly, urging us to listen, to remember, and to honor the lives that once brought these ghost towns to life before they disappeared, almost overnight, into silence.